and welcome back to Ask The Unfaithful. As always, I'm joined by my brilliant co-host, James Anir. James, I've missed you. It's great to be back in the studio. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Sam. How are you?
I'm doing great. I moved the youngest into college on Friday, so that's always a happy but grieving exercise for all of you that also have had to put your kids in college or say goodbye to them, or maybe they're in their senior year and you're having to wrestle with that. So it was an emotional weekend, but it was a great weekend. And so, you get through it one day at a time.
Yeah, like most things.
Yes. Today, we're talking about something that is really imperative. Today's kind of question or statement is how the unfaithful's distorted thinking destroys hope in both partners. Now, what's interesting is there's so many quotes by famous people, philosophers, psychotherapists, religious figures, whatever, about the way we think. Let me read you just a couple to pound home the idea that if we unfaithful don't change the way we think, there is not going to be long-term change. Albert Einstein said, "The world as we have created, it is a process of our thinking. It cannot be changed without changing our thinking." The book of Proverbs in the Bible says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Buddha said, "The mind is everything. What you think, you become." Norman Vincent Peale said, "Change your thoughts and you change your world." So we're calling it distorted thinking, but there's another term for it that's very well documented in society. We call it stinking thinking. So, what is stinking thinking in the life of the unfaithful partner?
The first thing I'm going to do, and unfortunately, this is only for the people who are watching on YouTube, but I want to introduce you to Stinky. Stinky is one of the old Thai baby skunks, and this one happens to be wearing a sweater that says Stinkin' Thinkin' on it. So he sits on a perch over here, which is an old disused microphone boom, and reminds me not to have any stinking thinking. So he's going to sit on my shoulder
Okay,
during
visual aids
this.
for those that are watching.
Visual aids, yes, indeed. So the definition really of stinking thinking refers to distorted, mostly automatic or unhelpful thought patterns that sabotage emotional growth. They fuel shame or blame and justify harmful behaviors, especially since we're talking about betrayal trauma and recovery, especially in the aftermath of betrayal. So these thoughts, interestingly, often feel true, but they're rooted in fear, in self protection, or entitlement, not in relational integrity or reality. And over time, they become what I like to call mind traps, which are basically nearly intractable beliefs. And that can be really problematic. As your quotes referenced, you've got to really work to change that thinking, to change your world. And they
Because there's roots to our thinking. So, what are some of the roots to this stinking thinking?
so shame and fear, self protection. So the shame and fear surround really what happened to us throughout our lives to this point, especially when we're kids or teenagers or young adults. They don't actually have to be what we would identify as a trauma, but they are defenses surrounding that. So they could be numbing, denial, perfectionism, but they're all driven by that need to not feel shame or need to not feel fear. Also, one of the roots is learned relational scripts. When we're growing up, we learn how to interact. We get certain attachment to our parents, to other people. We're shown whether we have to keep things secret or whether we are wide open. It could be emotional unavailability, it could be gaslighting, avoidant coping, entitlement. All of those things can be in those learned relational scripts. All of those are at the root of it. As far as identifying them, it's not something where you can go, oh, well, let me just pick five of those, and those are the ones.
Right.
Some of what I just talked about may hit home with you.
Because there are, as you would say, characteristics, But for those that are watching and listening, here's kind of what stinking thinking does or sounds like. And so off we go with some of the characteristics.
So stinking thinking blocks accountability and interestingly also blocks empathy. They'll sound like self-pity, defensiveness, or justification. They'll reinforce some of those old coping mechanisms that we're actually trying to get rid of: denial, avoidance, minimization. And yet they'll often feel protective. They make us feel like we're safe, even though that's actually not true because they're actually destructive over time. There are actually 5 categories of really common stinking thinking in the unfaithful partner. You're going to be familiar with a few of these. The first category: blame and minimization. Oh, well, what I did isn't as bad as other people. Why is what I did so unforgivable? It wasn't really cheating, it was just emotional. Or they weren't meeting my needs anyway. Or if they really loved me, they wouldn't still be this angry. They're overreacting. It's been months already. I said I was sorry. Isn't that enough? That's a lot of examples for that particular
Right.
category.
Absolutely.
Then there's avoidant thinking. Well, you know, if we don't talk about it, it'll blow over eventually. Maybe if I just stay quiet, this will go away. I'll fix it by being extra nice. Or as one of my clients says, make nice. I'll make
Mm.
nice instead of digging into the hard stuff. You know what? If I admit everything, I'm going to lose them. And I used to do this thing that I used to call SUSO: shut up and shine on.
Hmm.
Really, that meant shine them on, right? None of that works. Why? Because, hey, it's not actually relational, is it? It's just trying to, like, let's push it on, let's move through it without actually processing. Then you get into another common arena of this, and that's entitlement and justification. Well, I had needs too. After everything I've done to apologize, I deserve some grace. I've already paid the price. Why do they keep punishing me? They should be grateful I stayed. Yeah, none of those are going to land real well, right? And they're terrible justifications. Remember, these are thoughts, they're not actually necessarily spoken. The problem with that, of course, is we start believing them, which we'll get into a bit later. But I want to focus on these last 2 common arenas of stinking thinking because they tend to be really hidden and yet they cause most of the other negative thinking that we have. First would be shame-based thoughts. I'm broken. I'll never change. They'll never trust me again, so why even try? I'm the worst person in the world. That could also come up as I'm just a jerk, or substitute any word in there. I deserve to suffer. This is my punishment. That's a huge one. In one sense, I deserve a lot of negative stuff to come my way. So then what happens, of course, is that if I'm expecting that, then I'm going to see everything through that filter. And it also flips the other side. I don't deserve for anything good to happen. The next common arena: hopelessness or collapse. Nothing I do matters. This will never get better. I've ruined everything. What's the point? It sounds a lot like some of the others, but it's more forceful. That hopelessness or collapse, that's where, if you're thinking that stuff, that's got to be an alarm bell for you.
Makes total sense. So, asking this inevitable question, let's talk about why these thoughts are so dangerous and so troubling for both partners.
Everything we've talked about sounds internal because they're thoughts. So a lot of times, unfaithfuls will fall into this trap of, well, it's only hurting me. It's not hurting anybody else for me to think that way. But the problem is, those thoughts always end up affecting others, especially, of course, our betrayed partners. Our brains really believe what we think as well as what we say. So, literally, our negative thoughts, the brain hears them and then they become encoded, especially when they're repeated over and over again. So, a way to think about that is that it's a habit. Have you ever tried to change a negative thought and found out, like, gee, it just keeps popping up for me? That's because it's habitual. Habits form through repetition. So If we're going to change them, we then have to repeatedly change the negative thoughts to change the negative encoding habit so that we're now switching that over into a positive encoding. We have to do that to undo it, essentially. It's kind of like, okay, I've laced up my shoes, but there's twists in it. So now, has anybody ever tried to undo a twist? You got to
Right.
follow it through the whole thing. You might as well relace the whole shoe. Another problem is that they create emotional distance and block vulnerability. How could they not? It's definitely, I'm going to insulate myself. And so that creates the distance. And certainly I'm not going to be vulnerable because that could result in pain. And probably in a lot of our experience, especially in early life, it may well have resulted in pain. We have to overcome that. And lastly, they keep you stuck in the very mindset that led to the disconnection and harm in the first place.
So, a key takeaway here would be that our thoughts are pulling us away from empathy, accountability, healthy change, or sobriety. We are likely utilizing this stinking thinking. So if you're listening as an unfaithful, or if you're listening as a betrayed and you're like, yes, 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 over and over, he or she does this, this is the first step towards rewiring either your mind or helping your partner understand that they're going to have to do some rewiring for relational healing and emotional maturity. All of us who've been unfaithful have practiced massive emotional immaturity, and all the betrayeds are shouting, yes, say it, Sam. Say it again for the people in the back that it's time for emotional maturity. Repeatedly attending to them every time they come up, these stinking thinking thoughts, when they come up, they have to be challenged and they have to be ultimately changed. So let's talk more about how the unfaithful's unhealthy, one might even say shame based thoughts harm the betrayed partner.
The unfaithful partner's distorted or defensive thoughts, they don't stay silent. They're actually going to seep into your tone, your behaviors, and decisions. Tone, you might be thinking sarcastic or a bit edgy. That's possible, but also flat, going completely flat, like looking almost like a robot. That's also an indicator. And we're going to make decisions that are more protective than connective. Over time, as we do those things, the stinking thinking actually becomes your relational toxin. And then that is going to re traumatize the betrayed partner because it's going to feel very much like the betrayal. It's going to block repair. It creates these harms to the betrayed partner in these ways. One, invalidation of pain. When we as unfaithfuls minimize impact, it wasn't that bad, you should be over it by now, then we're actually emotionally gaslighting our partner. So they're experiencing a lot of what we call denial again. Then at that point, they're questioning their own reality, which is going to deepen their confusion and it's going to prolong the trauma. Thoughts like you should be over it by now also, very importantly, reinforce the idea that our partner's pain is a problem, not a valid response. That's hugely important. This is going to have a psychological effect, which we're going to talk about a psychological effect for each one of these. This one is going to create hypervigilance, self-doubt, and chronic anxiety. And many betrayed partners start to wonder, am I crazy for feeling this way? It perpetuates that. Two, the reinforcement of a power imbalance. So stinking thinking that includes entitlement or blame. I had needs too. You push me away. Subtly shifts. It doesn't sound very subtle, but subtly shifts the emotional labor back onto the betrayed partner. That prevents trust from being rebuilt. And the psychological effect here is that it causes the betrayed partner feelings of helplessness, rage, emotional exhaustion. They may feel even like they have to parent the unfaithful emotionally, further compounding the trauma because now they're having to parent emotionally the very person that caused this in the first place.
And the betrayeds absolutely despise that, and rightly so. I just met with someone who said to me, I feel like I have to hold my unfaithful's hand to do anything. That's why Emotional maturity is so important. Relational leadership that you have talked about so many times is so important. So, what's next, number three, in terms of how this affects the betrayed?
It triggers them and it re-traumatizes. What creates that ongoing hurt and harm, which we've kind of encapsulated in a couple of these. But really, when the unfaithful uses avoidant or performative behaviors rooted in stinking thinking, it triggers feelings of abandonment and reminds the betrayed partner of the original betrayal. So things like performative, oh, I'm going to put on an act for you so you feel like everything is good, even though I'm thinking this really negative stuff, either about you or about myself, that immediately separates and that creates feelings of abandonment. This has a really harsh psychological effect. When we talk about PTSD for those experiencing betrayal trauma, there are flashbacks, nightmares, physiological stress responses like tight chest, nausea, insomnia, and ongoing PTSD symptoms that can intensify because of this particular piece of being triggered and re-traumatized. So a huge negative effect from this one.
Number four.
Delays in emotional safety and trust rebuilding. Really, safety and trust go hand in hand. There are psychological definitions of safety where trust is the primary part. If the unfaithful collapses into shame or hopelessness, I'll never be good enough, nothing I do matters, the betrayed partner can feel emotionally stranded, or worse, feel like they have to emotionally rescue the very person who threw them in the deep water. They're left without a safe or consistent emotional presence, which as unfaithfuls, we have to become. There's a psychological effect to this one as well. It increases loneliness in the betrayed, resentment, and emotional shutdown. Healing becomes delayed not just now by what happened, but by how the unfaithful is still thinking in a negative way about what happened.
And that fortress of our negative thinking is impenetrable if we won't do anything about it. So, what's number five in the way it harms the betrayed?
Loss of hope for repair. Sinking thinking interferes with real change. When the unfaithful appears stuck in their victimhood or defensiveness, the betrayed partner often loses hope that recovery is even possible. It interrupts the repair by blocking the unfaithful partner from being able to be genuinely empathetic and accountable, which are two critical recovery tools. The psychological effects from this is that it's going to lead to detachment in the betrayed partner, depression, and decisions to emotionally or physically separate from the relationship to protect themselves, to keep themselves safe. So it's going to have the opposite effect of what you really want relationally.
I think that the bottom line is that the unfaithful's mindset is not a private battle. It becomes the foundation on which the betrayed partner is trying to rebuild safety. So if we've got all these toxic thoughts going on in the background, but yet we're trying to white knuckle it and we're just trying to just suck it up and put on an air or a front, eventually the betrayed just does not feel safe. Without challenging this stinking thinking, the betrayed partner continues to experience betrayal even after the affair has ended. But now we're going to transition into how stinking thinking harms the actual unfaithful. I mean, one could already listen to what you've said and see how it's harming them, but let's lay it out on a real foundational level.
Really, what we're getting at here is it doesn't only harm the relationship or the betrayed partner, it's also corrosive to the unfaithful partner's own healing identity and mental health. Those patterns are going to keep you locked up in emotional immaturity, shame, and relational sabotage, which is generally unconscious. Anything that we talk about, we've got to make it conscious in order to do something about it. One of the ways, the first way it does this is it's going to fuel these shame cycles. It's like the shame motor is not going to run without fuel. This is like tons of fuel. So the negative core beliefs that are reinforced and reinforced and reinforced over and over again by the stinking thinking or this shameful thinking can create paralysis. And it certainly is not going to create transformation. Distorted thoughts like I'm broken, I'm irredeemable, I'm just a POS, I'll never be good enough, activate what's called toxic shame, which is paralyzing rather than motivating. So instead of fostering things like accountability, it's going to lead to self-condemnation and withdrawal. Remember what Sharon always says is that shame is very singular. You can't be reached when you're in shame. You can't connect.
Right.
So there's a psychological effect of this that's really important, and that's that toxic, chronic shame spiral most often results in emotional dysregulation, chronic negativity, anxiety, depression, and relapse into old coping mechanisms like lying, avoidance, numbing behaviors, full on relapse. Number two, it blocks growth and emotional maturity. Self blame, blaming others, excuses, victimhood type thinking. Justify harmful behavior to both your partner and yourself and delay the development of core relational traits like empathy, frustration tolerance, and humility. And I know we're throwing out a lot of info here, which, you can always press rewind and write this stuff down, right? The psychological effect of blocking growth and emotional maturity would be pretty obvious. The unfaithful partner may well stay emotionally adolescent, kind of like a teenager, unable to fully feel, own, or repair relational harm. And that's going to reinforce an identity built on entitlement and self protection, which is always going to be dangerous because it is not relational at all.
Moving on to number 3.
It undermines self respect. When we cling to distorted thinking, stinking thinking, to avoid discomfort, we often betray our own values, even in recovery post affair. Over time, that's going to create internal dissonance. Dissonance meaning like a gap, right? This is going to be like the gap between how we're behaving and who we really are, who we really want to be, which is really living within our integrity and our values. And that is a bigger distancing than we've already been in often. That's really important because the psychological effect is there's going to be an erosion of self trust. So trusting what I'm thinking, what I'm feeling. And I'm also going to develop, if I'm the unfaithful, a fragmented sense of identity. So I may even begin to feel like an imposter or a
Yeah.
failure, even when we're trying to do the right thing.
Moving on to number 4 now.
It inhibits vulnerability and connection. I know we've been saying it, so no duh, right? But it inhibits vulnerability and connection. If the unfaithful avoids honest emotional expression, kind of goes into that thought of, why bother? They'll never forgive me. This is hopeless. They're going to stay emotionally unavailable. In other words, you'll stay disconnected from your partner, but you're also going to stay disconnected from yourself, your higher self, your true self. Without that emotional intimacy, AKA connection, real relational repair is impossible. And you've got to think of relational repair also in that, how am I going to repair this with me? If I can't get to know myself, who I really am in full integrity and values, then I can't really repair outside relationships as well. So the psychological effect are going to be persistent feelings of loneliness, of isolation, emotional numbness. And that can reinforce a false belief that the unfaithful is unlovable or beyond redemption, which keeps them separated from everybody else, which quite horribly can lead to a condition called anhedonia, where almost everything feels and appears to others emotionally flat. Like enjoyment in life is diminished to a state where it's dulled or sometimes even impossible to feel.
And then there's a 5th way that it affects us unfaithful. And that is probably one of the most problematic ones. Not that the others aren't extremely problematic, but this one also really undermines everything we're trying to do.
Most people who actually experience stinking thinking and shame and such are going to think, well, this doesn't make any sense because I'm denying that I have any control over anything anyway. And we might be even having thoughts of, well, I'm not in control anymore. I don't have any choices. But here's how it works it often masquerades as protection. So thoughts like, if I just stay quiet, this will blow over, or if I act nice, I'll earn trust back. It may feel like a temporary control, but they're actually going to block the authentic healing. So it's not going to last. If you kind of listen to that last statement, that kind of thinking causes any kind of ownership to become about performance instead of transformation. And the psychological effect, long-term emotional suppression, increased anxiety, and eventual collapse because we can only hold so much, right? And the unfaithful is going to end up stuck between fear of rejection and fear of exposure.
Because again, it's not just a cognitive issue, it's a psychological and emotional trap. It keeps the unfaithful stuck in outdated survival strategies, and it prevents us from becoming the partner that we really want to be anyway, because again, we're living by performance and not authentic transformation or even just authenticity. And all the betrayeds are like, that's exactly right. That's what we want. So, how does stinking thinking or distorted thinking sabotage the relationship as a whole?
Some of these we kind of covered, but just to like bring them into this relational piece, creates emotional distance is the first one. Your partner's gonna sense when your words are disconnected from your deeper truth. They may even sense it before you can. I've had that happen. Sharon used to be able to read me like a comic book. Me, I couldn't make head or tail. So really important that that emotional distance can come without us even having a second thought about it or really realizing it at all. The second one is it breaks down communication. When we're defensive, when we justify or over explain things, it prevents real dialogue. And that's critical to relationship, to relational healing. We have to be able to have a real dialogue. So, in a sense, it's like a barrier to that. It doesn't just not build safety and trust, it erodes it. Your mindset actually has to align with your actions to rebuild safety. So if I'm putting a smile on everything, saying everything's good, or just going to therapy or coaching or 12 step and not actually participating, not actually trying to make change, then my mindset's not aligning with the actions. And so nothing's going to happen. If my mindset is positive rather than stinky, it's going to be, oh, that's what I need to do. That's what I'm going to do. Now, I'm not saying that's an easy thing, but definitely, and I've said it in the past, that energy flows where priority goes. So sometimes we have to kick our own butt. Somebody asked me about how can the avoidant become less avoidant? Give me something practical here. Sometimes we just have to kick our own butt and do it. I'm not saying that's the only answer, but it is something we have to motivate ourselves in order to just take that first step. Another one, it re traumatizes the betrayed partner. When your thinking minimizes your partner's pain or centers around your fear, it's going to reopen the wounds. And when those wounds keep getting reopened, they cannot heal.
So now, as we transition, we're going to give the unfaithful some helpful points on how can we change our distorted thinking.
I think first, increase awareness. Part of that is just asking yourself those questions like, is that thinking dead on? Is that actually what's going on here? It's really helpful to keep what's called a thought tracker for even a week. Just try it. Just try it for a week. In that, you're just going to note moments where you're defensive, where you minimize, where you feel some hopelessness. Can also be really good to note when you're feeling the opposites of those things. That's going to give you an idea of, oh, man, that's how often that's occurring. Okay, now I can create a plan, which would then be challenge those core beliefs or that stinking thinking. Ask, is this a helpful thought? Is it actually honest or is it my perception versus reality? Is it relationally safe to think this way? Then, of course, when you are asking that about your thoughts and you discover, ooh, no, it's not relationally safe, or no, that's not a helpful thought, you need to replace it. This works. It's old school, but it works. Replace something like I'll never be enough with I can grow into someone who's trustworthy. I can do it. I can grow into that person. Notice, not some blithe, toxic positivity. I am totally trustworthy. I'm saying I can grow into that person. It actually gives you a chance. It doesn't sound ridiculous to your stinking thinking brain that you're trying to
Right.
change. Using reality checks. I'm going to throw out a bit of a warning here. Reality checking has the potential to be a real bummer, man. Like it can take us down the negative self talk, shame based core belief spiral if we let it. So, this is where support is absolutely essential. Whatever that support looks like, could be your therapist, your coach, could be sober support, could be your best friend who really gets you and gets the issue, doesn't minimize it, doesn't vilify your partner. But it's essential to have that support to basically reality check the reality checks so that they don't take you down that spiral. So they're not like, whoa, dude, yes, that's a reality. And look, there can be change here. It's really important to remember you can change behaviors. You can make amends for your negative behaviors results. You can even make amends for stinking thinking to yourself as well as your partner. You can change the roots of why you behaved that way in the first place. If you can keep that in mind, but having somebody else to help you keep that in mind, huge. Another one, regulate your emotions first. We talked about this in the real method. Regulate your emotions first. Most stinking thinking is fueled by fear, shame, or panic, even. So we need to calm the body before responding because when we're in a calm body, our survival brain can't be wound up and keep us reactive. When we can calm our body, breathing, alternate tapping, somebody called this a butterfly hug the other day. I kind of like that. Those sorts of things are going to be how you calm your body. Next, commit to empathy work. Ask, if I fully believed their pain, how would I show up differently? Because a lot of the stinking thinking really goes to, I don't really believe the pain fully. It's like almost so intense, too big. I can't believe it.
Yeah.
Then, really importantly, because notice how I'm talking about also how you've got to treat yourself here. You may not want to treat yourself well. That I'm not really talking about. I'm talking about treat yourself with some love, like some empathy, not in the way that gives you an excuse, right? If I fully believed my own pain from my shame, how would I show up differently for my own growth? Okay, align with integrity. I talked about sort of your higher self, the person of integrity, the person who lives within their values. Anchor into this question. It's a great question. What kind of partner do I really want to be? Anchor into that because that's going to align with your values. Let that vision, not fear, lead your recovery thoughts and actions.
For the unfaithful and the betrayed who are in their relationship and they're trying to work on this together, what are some things that they can do as a team?
One of them, which I'm going to stress, is not really early on because they have to be mutually agreed on. And you may not know how to mutually agree on stuff early on. And that is to name your patterns, the negative patterns together. Gently call out distorted beliefs when they appear. And again, early on, that might not be possible because there's so much emotional stuff happening that it just can't happen. Later on, though, it's absolutely a beautiful way to do it, especially when you get that mutual agreement. Using agreed upon check ins, weekly or bi weekly, reflect on ways that your thinking has actually shifted positively or even regressed. And that's a great thing to check in on and share. It's not accusatory, it's just to say, this is what is happening for me. Use a lot of I statements there. Big one, unfaithfuls, you got to take emotional leadership. Unfaithful must lead this change. The betrayed can support, but they can't be responsible for fixing your stinking thinking. Use outside support together. Sharon and I, and you, Sam, are all about relational healing from the get-go. That
Yeah.
doesn't mean you can deep dive into Gottman relational couples therapy, but you can do it in terms of betrayal and unfaithfulness. So attending those sessions, doing that couples therapy, but also the individual therapy and coaching needs to be very relationally oriented. Replacing judgment with curiosity is another one. Learn to ask, not accuse when your distorted thoughts arise. Remember, if it's like, it's probably a distorted thought. So pull yourself back and ask, is there something going on here that you need to talk about? Or even yourself, is there something going on inside here that isn't quite on target? Do I need to address that with myself? Do I need some outside input on that? Ask yourself, what just happened there? What did you believe in that moment?
It's excellent. As we are about to say goodbye, what would be important is to take some time to start to say, where does this distorted or stinking thinking show up in my story? And maybe what's one negative belief or what's one victim-y belief that I can challenge this week? Because remember, you're not powerless over your thoughts. You must become aware of them to begin transforming them. I read this week. You don't get what you wish for in recovery, you get what you fight for in recovery. And so if you're an unfaithful, if you're not fighting against these negative thoughts, negative beliefs, you're not going to see much breakthrough at all. This isn't about perfection, it's about integrity, empathy, and creating a sense of relational safety for your partner, but also for yourself. Ultimately, it comes down to the unfaithful. And I know that you believe this, James. It really comes down to the unfaithful showing relational leadership. And we started this whole thing off today with a story of a betrayed just feeling like I got to hold their hand to do anything. And it is such an unused term, but it is a brilliant term that you dropped several sessions ago, is that we unfaithful have to show relational leadership. Without it, the relationship, I'm not going to say isn't going to heal, but it's going to stay stuck and it's going to plateau, right?
Yeah, there's no other way it can happen. We have to be proactive. We have to be the ones who bring things up. We have to be the ones who make our appointments. We have to be the ones who just take action because that shows so much. But also, interestingly, in the brain, when we take action, it tells our brain, I'm worth it. It removes that stinking thinking. So that action piece is extremely important.
It also says, I'm being an adult. I'm showing initiative. And so today, as we say goodbye, we're thankful for each and every one of you that listen, that watch, that email in and reach out to us for help. There was an old organization. I remember growing up, I used to watch TV all the time. I think I was 9 or 10, and they came up with a statement that said, if you don't get help from us, at least get help somewhere. And we're here to tell you, maybe you don't love us, but you love our content. Maybe you love us. I don't know. What matters is that you put this stuff into practice and you get help. If it's not with us, get help somewhere. If we can help, by all means, feel free to reach out to us with a short email. That is asktheunfaithful@gmail.com. Now, please understand, some of you write in and you're asking for advice or therapy or counseling or coaching over email. Our attorneys have told us we cannot do that. We might make suggestions and we might point you in the right direction if we know a direction, but we're not able to do therapy over email. We love you reaching out for help, but just please keep that in mind before you hit send, because the last thing that we want to do is have you have any type of offense because we didn't answer your question when at some level we might be prohibited from doing that. But if you want to find out about how to attend an intensive with James and Sharon, by all means, reach out and we'll point you in the right direction. We'll do everything that we can for you. So as we say goodbye, challenge your thoughts, be compassionate, but be diligent. And we'll see you next time on Ask the Unfaithful.